My wife and I are looking for something to watch. We scroll through the infinite abyss of Disney Plus when the 1992 classic Aladdin pops up. The nostalgia hits. Memories flood my feeble brain. Aladdin wasn't a movie to me. It was foundational to my childhood. I watched this tape until the VCR wheezed. I even had the Sega Genesis game. Remember the lava level with the magic carpet? I'm pretty sure I never actually beat that stage because it was so hard, let alone the game. See, I'm Kuwaiti, born and raised. And as a young Arab boy, Aladdin felt significant. In my cute little childish mind, I wasn't seeing the nuance. I saw us. It felt like Arabian culture had finally been invited to the table. Disney is recognizing my world. But I also had this vivid memory of my father. Every time I would watch Aladdin, he'd be rolling his eyes. He hated it. But I didn't know why. Fast forward to the present day. I press play for the first time in 20 years, and it takes all but 5 minutes for me to realize exactly what my dad saw. Suddenly, I'm rolling my eyes too. I realized that Arabs weren't invited to the party. We were the entertainment. Actually, no. Worse than that. We were the punchline. This is where it gets complicated. Because Aladdin conflicts me. It's a masterpiece of the Disney Renaissance. The animation's fluid. Robin Williams gives a performance that changes voice acting forever. And a whole new world. It still gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. But at the same time, it's a movie dense with offensive tropes. It taught an entire generation of Western people that my heritage is barbaric, violent, and inherently dangerous. I see the issues because I've lived the reality those stereotypes erase. But my American wife, she doesn't see it. I gotta unpack this. I want to explain to her and to everyone who didn't grow up in the region why this movie hurts me and my people. And if you're Arab and don't see the problems, allow me to open your eyes. In this video, I'm going to deconstruct the concept of Orientalism and how it functions in the media, discuss the original Aladdin tale, which, spoiler alert, isn't actually in 1001 Nights. Look at the 1940s British movie that actually inspired Aladdin, catalog every single negative stereotype the movie perpetuates, and finally talk about why this matters, and why, despite everything I just said, I still kind of like the movie. Yalla, go make yourself a chai halib, because this is going to be a long and detailed one. Chapter 1. Orientalism. Before we get to the genies and the magic carpets and Robin Williams carrying an entire movie on his talent alone, we need to eat our vegetables. We have to establish the framework we're operating in. Because just calling Aladdin racist might be true, but it's too broad. The specific terminology we need to use here is Orientalism. Orientalism is a concept popularized by Palestinian-American scholar Edward Said in 1978. Said argues the East isn't a real place in the Western view. By the East, he means the Arab world, North Africa, and Asia. The West doesn't see it as made up of real, complex people. They see it as a stage. For centuries, the West constructed a fictionalized version of these regions that existed purely in their collective imagination. This is what they called the Orient. And this functional universe, it operates on a very specific set of rules. Rule 1. It's timeless and unchanging. The Orient doesn't progress. It's forever stuck in an ancient, mystical past. Rule 2. It's exotic, mysterious, and highly sexualized. It's a place of harems, snake charmers, and forbidden desires. Rule 3. It's inherently irrational, violent, and backwards. It's a place ruled by emotion and brutality, not logic and justice. So why do this? Why paint half the globe with this specific brush? It wasn't because of ignorance, and it wasn't to be mean. It was a project of self-definition. By framing the East as chaotic and barbaric, the West got to define itself as rational, restrained, and civilized. It creates this paternal dynamic. The West is the intellectual adult. The East is the unruly, problematic child. And what do adults do? They have to govern the children. Said argues that this was the intellectual justification for colonialism, and it didn't happen in a vacuum. You can trace this ideological engine back to the 15th century papal bulls and the doctrine of discovery. These were religious and legal decrees that gave European nations the green light to seize non-Christian lands, enslave indigenous populations, and colonize the Americas, Africa, and Asia. For nearly a millennium, the West has painted anything outside of itself as dumb, violent, and backwards. It was the public relations campaign required to justify invading their lands, erasing their cultures and forcing religious assimilation, all for the sake of white supremacy and the ownership of resources. And the thing about these deep-seated Orientalist tropes, they didn't just vanish when the empires fell, they evolved, they adapted, and eventually they made their way right onto the silver screen. Chapter 2: The Original Aladdin Tale. Orientalism inspiring Aladdin is only one part of the picture. What's the origin story of the original Aladdin tale? Myself and almost everyone I know grew up thinking the Aladdin story comes from the famous book 1001 Nights, but it actually doesn't. If you don't know, 1001 Nights, which is often called Arabian Nights, is one of the most famous pieces of literature from the Middle East and North Africa. It's a giant collection of popular folk tales gathered over hundreds of years. The book is wrapped around a clever story framing structure. Shahryar is a king who marries a new wife every night and then kills her. Scheherazade is up next, but to keep from being killed, she tells him a new exciting story every night for 1001 nights. It was the ultimate survival tactic. The first version of this collection was put together in the early 8th century. Most of those early stories came from India and Persia. As time went on, Turkish and Arabic stories were added in, and it became known as Alf Layla, or 1000 Nights. The stories were edited, transformed, changed, and new ones were added in throughout the years. But there's one version that changed Western pop culture. It came from a Frenchman, Antoine Galland, in 1709. He translated the stories into French, and the book became a massive hit. The Western world went crazy for it because of the magic, the genies, and the settings felt totally foreign and new to them. The English version was super influential to many American authors like Edgar Allan Poe. Last year, I read a new release of the book called The Annotated Arabian Nights, and it's amazing. The writer Paulo Lemos Horta and translator Yasmin Seal used multiple versions and translations of Arabian Nights to create a brand new, super authentic English translation of the stories. The annotations give a lot of historical and cultural context that give you a deep understanding of the stories and their inspirations. I highly recommend buying this annotated new version. Affiliate link in the description, where if you buy it using that link, I make a small percentage of commission. The Arabian Nights is an amazing piece of nonfiction. The stories are beautiful, a lot of them are super raunchy, and sometimes the violence comes out of nowhere and totally shocks you. But there's also so much imagination in these pages. When you read it, you can understand how someone can get the ideas to make a movie like Aladdin. But speaking of Aladdin, did you know that the boy with the lamp wasn't in the original Arabian Nights? Here's what actually happened. In 1709, the French translator Antoine Galland heard the story from a Syrian storyteller named Hannah Diab. Galland liked the story so much that he added it into his French translation of Arabian Nights. From there, it made its way into the newer versions. So the most famous quote-unquote Arabian story the West knows was actually slipped into the book by a French guy. I said quote-unquote Arabian story because after I show you all the offensive Orientalist tropes in Aladdin, I'm going to go into detail about the original Aladdin story and how it really is a mishmash of so many different cultures, and it's not necessarily a true Arabian story, so stick around for that. I'm going to tell you the short version of the story in a minute, but first we need to clear something up. If you go online, you'll see lots of articles saying Aladdin is Chinese. It even says that on Wikipedia. But why do they say that? Because the very first line of the old story says, Majesty, in the capital of one of China's vast and wealthy kingdoms. Here's the thing, they didn't literally mean the country China. China simply means somewhere far, far away. However, some illustrators and theater directors took the Chinese setting seriously. That's why old Orientalist illustrations of Aladdin make him look Chinese. But if you actually read the words in the story, it's obviously set in Arabia. Now let me give you a summary of Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp from the Arabian Nights. Aladdin, a poor but clever boy, is tricked by a sorcerer into retrieving a lamp from an underground cave. After being abandoned inside, Aladdin rubs a ring given to him by the sorcerer, and out pops a genie who teleports him outside of the cave. Using the genie, Aladdin gains wealth, status, and ends up marrying the Sultan's daughter. The sorcerer later steals the lamp and kidnaps the princess. But Aladdin outwits him, recovers the lamp, defeats the sorcerer and later his brother, and secures his place as a powerful and rightful ruler. So we can at least say the Disney cartoon uses the same bones as the old story, but that's where the similarities end. Chapter 3: Aladdin's True Inspiration. If Aladdin was loosely inspired by the original tale, where did Disney get the rest of their ideas? The answer is a British movie from 1940 called The Thief of Baghdad. It's an epic, flashy fantasy adventure. Here's a quick summary. A good king named Ahmed is overthrown and blinded by an evil magician named Jafar. Ahmed escapes and teams up with a quick-witted street thief named Abu. Together, they go on a magical trip with flying carpets, genies, and monsters. In the end, Abu learns to be a true hero, Jafar is defeated, and the king gets his throne and his princess back. So this movie is very much a product of its time. It has that big 1940s spectacle vibe. But let's look closer. Do we see any of the Orientalism we defined in Chapter 1? There are some Arab elements, mostly in the clothing of the characters, but there is way more Indian influence. And it makes perfect sense in a historical context. Britain ruled over India back then. They had easy access to Indian resources to make their movie. To the British colonizers, thanks to Orientalism, Arabia, Persia, and India were basically all the same thing. When you watch it, the blueprints for Disney's Aladdin are right there in plain sight. There's a sidekick named Abu. Disney just turned him into a monkey. They didn't bother to change the bad guy's name, Jafar. There's a bumbling sultan who loves toys. There's a princess who exists just to be a prize at the end. Because it was the 1940s, she doesn't even have a name in the movie. Abu steals food for starving people and gets chased by guards. Sounds a lot like a certain Disney hero stealing bread, right? The heroes meet the princess in a garden. Disney swapped it for a balcony. Abu meets a genie and goes through trials in a cave. Disney swaps Abu for Aladdin. There's a flying carpet. A fun fact, magic carpets are not in the original Aladdin story. That idea was lifted from a different Arabian Nights tale. The Thief of Baghdad borrowed it, and Disney borrowed it from them. Abu gets a headshot on Jafar riding on a flying horse. Prince Ahmed wins the nameless princess. He offers Abu a big government job, but Abu says no thanks. He jumps on the magic carpet and flies off to find adventure, and everybody laughs. It's a cute movie and certainly a product of its time. So what does Disney do? What they do best. They steal. They took 90% of the material from this older movie, mixed some characters together, made the genie the star, and finally gave the princess a name, Jasmine. They were planning on using the same city name, Baghdad or Baghdad, but in a strange twist of Kuwaiti connection, the Gulf War was happening right when they were making the movie. So they changed the name to Agrabah, which sounds vaguely Arab. But here's the massive point I want you to sit with before we start breaking down exactly why Aladdin is offensive. When Disney made the movie, they weren't looking at real Arab culture for inspiration. They were looking at an old British movie about Arab culture. They were borrowing from a fake Orientalist fantasy that was already offensive 50 years before Disney even drew their first sketch. They recycled old stereotypes. Stereotypes made by empires to justify ruling over us, and put it all to a catchy beat with Robin Williams singing and dancing all the way to the bank. Chapter 4. If it's authentic to Arabian Nights, what's the problem? 1001 Nights is not a history textbook. It's a wild, chaotic maze of folklore, magic, and violence. In its original form, and especially in those sensationalized European translations we talked about, it was basically the pulp fiction of its era. It was designed to entertain. It wasn't designed to educate you on people and their customs. People have said, well, if the source material is inherently violent and chaotic, isn't Disney's Aladdin just being authentic? If the old stories are barbaric, why is it a problem for the movie to show that? And what do I mean by violent? Let me give you an example. In the original story, Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp, Aladdin and his uncle are out in the desert. His uncle is murmuring magical words that he doesn't understand, and a stone with a bronze ring appears out of the ground. Aladdin gets scared and tries to run away, but his uncle detains him, gets angry, and strikes him so hard across the cheek that he falls to the ground. There flowed from him such a quantity of blood, it seemed that his front teeth had been knocked clean out of his mouth. So if the original Arabian Nights stories can be brutal, why can't their adaptations be? On a surface level, that sounds like a fair point about artistic loyalty, but it misunderstands how storytelling actually shapes the way the public sees the world. That argument falls apart for two big reasons. Fantasy is not anthropology. We don't read Grimm's fairy tales to understand what real life was like in 19th century Germany. We don't read the Odyssey to judge the morals of modern Greek people. Those stories were engineered to be huge, over the top, and shocking. But when creators treat Arabian Nights like a cultural documentary instead of a collection of fairy tales, they make a dangerous mistake. They take fantastical elements meant for pure escapism and present them as the foundational reality of the Middle East. When Disney's Aladdin shows a merchant threatening to chop off a woman's hand for stealing an apple, it doesn't frame it as dark, twisted, or a fairy tale trope. It frames it as the inevitable, dusty, everyday reality of the Arab world. Authorship and intent. And this right here is the textbook definition of Orientalism. The issue isn't just the content on the screen, it's about who's holding the camera and what they decide to cut. This is a case of Western storytellers going into the edit bay of Arab culture, cherry-picking the most regressive, exotic, and violent clips, and leaving our actual humanity on the cutting room floor. They codified these specific barbaric tropes as the standard identity for an entire people. When outsiders selectively extract violence and decadence to build a cinematic world, they aren't honoring a historical text. They're flattening a complex civilization into a racist theme park. They keep the magic, they keep the barbarism, but they edit out the nuance, effectively teaching an entire generation of kids that this caricature is the only way Arabs and the people from that region exist. Chapter 5. Everything wrong with Aladdin from an Arab's perspective. The film opens, we get the classic sweeping imagery of a lone camel rider trekking across a desolate sand dune. And immediately, before we even meet a single named character, we're hit with this lyric. When it's flat and immense and the heat is intense, it's barbaric, but hey, it's home. Let's be really clear about this. It's not pulled from some ancient historical text. This is a 100% pure Disney invention. Right out of the gate, it's incredibly offensive. It's pulling directly from page 1 of the Orientalist playbook, that Arabs, or really anyone who isn't Western, are just inherently, fundamentally barbarians. But here's the wildest part. If you actually saw this movie in theaters back in 1992, the lyrics were worse, where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. Yeah, you're hearing that right, where they cut off your ear if they don't like your face. The American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee protested this back in 1992, and to Disney's credit, they changed the line for the VHS release and all subsequent releases. But they kept the word barbaric. And Disney fought to keep that word in, so they took out a specific act of violence, but they deliberately kept the thesis statement of racism. They kept the core message that my culture is barbaric, and they put it right in the opening song. And the music playing underneath the singing, which I can't play, otherwise the video would be copyrighted into oblivion. It's using the quintessential Orientalist scale. If you want to know why this scale is Orientalist and problematic, then after watching this video, watch Faria Faraji's amazing video on the topic of Orientalism in music. But hey, at least they're using violins and not a duduk. The camera swoops in and we get this big sweeping establishing shot of the Sultan's palace in Agrabah. But I'm looking at this palace and my brain instantly hits a wall, because as an Arab, I instinctively know this isn't an Arabian city. It's not even an ancient Arabian city because of one dead giveaway, the shape of the domes. It's wrong. Did the Disney researchers just make a harmless mistake? No. This is Orientalism built right into the architecture. In actual Arabian architecture, domes are hemispherical. They're perfect half circles. Look at the Karawan Congregational Mosque in Tunisia, built in the 9th century. Look at the Great Mosque of Sana'a in Yemen, built in the 8th century. Look at Masjid al-Qiblatain in Saudi Arabia, built in the year 623. Notice the shape of the domes? Smooth half circles. You don't see those pinching pear-shaped domes in Arabian architecture. You know where you do see them? In Mughal architecture from the Indian subcontinent. You see them on the Taj Mahal in India. Notice how the dome curves back inward after reaching its widest point? You see them on the Badshahi Mosque in Pakistan. But honestly, I don't even think Disney was looking at India when they drew Agrabah. More likely, these designs were inspired by onion domes. And where do you find onion domes? On traditional churches in Russia. Look at the Transfiguration Church in Russia. Now look back at the Sultan's palace. Someone's belting out Arabian Nights while showing us architecture that looks like a Russian Christian church. Right here is a perfect visual metaphor for the entire movie. They took foreign, completely unrelated designs, shoved them into a desert, slapped an Arabian label on it, and expected us not to notice the difference. You tell me if this is offensive. We fly down into the streets of the city, and what is the very first thing we see? A man eating fire. Fire eating is a traditional Hindu, sadhu, or fakir performance. People originally did it to show their deep spiritual focus. It became a basic circus and slideshow trick in the West in the late 1800s. But let me be very clear, it is an Arab. The movie cuts back to the camera rider from the opening shot. And I just have to ask, what in the world are we looking at here? Look at what's on this guy's head. He's wearing a hugely exaggerated Sikh-style turban. Or if you really want to stretch it, you could argue it's an Afghani-style turban. But you know what it definitely isn't? Arab. And here's the wildest part of this whole scene. It turns out that this is the guy who's singing. Let's put all the pieces together. We have a character dressed like he's from India or Afghanistan. He's drawn, animated, and distributed by a massive Western American corporation. And he's the one singing a song to the audience about how Arabia is barbaric. Cut to the desert, and we meet our villain, Jafar, or Jafar in Arabic.
I had to slit a few throats, but I got it.
I want you to remember something. This is a Disney cartoon for children, but they just casually drop in a line about slitting throats. Why would they do that? Because it perfectly fits the Orientalist rulebook. The East is violent and barbaric, remember? And as we keep going through this movie, I'm going to show you how this is easily the most casually violent Disney movie of the 90s, maybe ever. The giant tiger head of the Cave of Wonders rises from the sand. The thief looks at it and says,
By Allah.
At first, you might think it's really weird for a Disney movie to be name-dropping the deity of Islam, but honestly, in the Arab world, saying Ya Allah is a very common thing you say when you see something amazing. It's basically our version of saying, oh my God. Now, usually, Disney stays away from using real-world religions in their movies, but they did make The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which is extremely Christian. So I want to be fair here. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that the character says Allah in this scene. Let's talk about Jafar's design. He looks cartoonishly evil, fitting for a Disney villain. But let me tell you a little funny story I have. My cousin is married to a guy who looks strangely similar to Jafar. I'm not even kidding. So his facial features, yeah, Jafar looks Arab. But the clothes, not even close. Once again, his whole outfit just screams Indian to me. It's the same cultural blender we saw with the palace domes and the fire eater. The thief steps into the cave and he straight up gets eaten alive while screaming right on camera. Look, characters die in Disney movies all the time, but watching a guy get crushed to death in the jaws of a magic sand tiger while screaming in pain, that feels brutal. What I'm feeling is they want to communicate that this is Arabia. It's a place of sudden, extreme violence. We meet our main hero, Aladdin, or Aladdin in Arabic. He pops up on screen wearing a red fez, or darbush in Arabic. This specific hat is mostly linked to Turkey, but to be fair, you do see some North African Arabs in Morocco and Egypt wearing them. Is it an Iraq/Baghdad thing? No. But I won't make a big fuss about the hat. Then there's the pants. Aladdin is running around in pants that look like they came straight out of an MC Hammer music video. It's true Arabs wear looser clothing to help with the intense heat of the region, but these pants are just silly. Still, it fits the bouncy 90s cartoon vibe, so I would say it's okay. But the one thing that's truly weird to me is that he's bare-chested under the tiny vest. Arab societies dress conservatively. A grown man running around the public streets bare-chested like that would be a problem. Plus, think about the weather. You would have a constant, brutal sunburn. Can you imagine the farmer's tan from wearing just a vest in the desert? It makes no sense. Now we gotta talk about the bread. He steals a literal French baguette. It looks nothing like real Arab bread. But I get why they chose to portray the bread like that. Visuals in movies, and especially cartoons, have to communicate fast. If the animators drew a flat, round, brown piece of traditional Arab bread, it would just look like a weird brown circle. Western audiences would not get what it is. A French baguette registers as bread in 1 second. So from a design side, I get it. But still, that's not Arab bread. We hear a guard yell, "I'll have your hands for a trophy." Wow. That is an incredible negative stereotype about thieves in Arabia getting their hands cut off right away. This isn't even going to be the only time this nasty stereotype appears in this movie. I'm going to tell you why this is so problematic later, when a street vendor grabs Jasmine's arm and is about to chop it off, so stay tuned. But what I really want to focus on here is the weapons, because the swords in Aladdin add a massive layer to that overt Orientalist violence. Now yes, other Disney cartoons have weapons. In Pocahontas there's guns, in Mulan, there's swords that are used in battles, but the weapons in Aladdin hit differently. What makes it Orientalism is how completely normal the violence is. The guards swing massive, deadly swords wildly through a crowded market just to catch a kid who stole a snack. Even Abu the monkey grabs a sword and starts swinging it around. The violence happens so fast and so often that it trains the audience to think that this is just how Arabs are. It makes you feel like these people will draw a deadly weapon for literally any reason. And there's going to be a lot more examples of that in this movie. Aladdin lands in a room full of heavily sexualized women. They're wearing outfits that show off their shoulders and stomachs. But oh, thank goodness their mouths are covered by transparent veils, right? One of them even bumps her bottom against Aladdin, which happens again in this movie later on. So let me set the record straight. Real Arab women do not and never have dressed like this. This is pure Orientalism. Even if these women were meant to be belly dancers, the way they're dressed is an Orientalist invention. Traditional belly dancers dressed much more conservatively. This is an example of Disney using Orientalist views of fetishizing exotic women to sell a fantasy to a Western audience. The chase keeps going and Aladdin jumps over a guy lying on a bed of nails. This is a classic Indian street magic trick. Indian, not Arab. A door swings open, a woman grabs Aladdin, picks him up and says, "Still, I think he's rather tasty." There's two massive problems here. First, that's straight up sexual harassment played for laughs. Second, we have to look at the actual joke they're making. Is this a fat-phobic, ugly joke? The movie wants us to laugh because this woman is overweight and has buck teeth. She desires him. But it's funny because she's supposedly unattractive. It's messed up, and not just for an Orientalist reason either. It's just straight up messed up even for Western audiences. The chase continues and Aladdin runs over hot coals. Indian street trick. Still not Arab. Then he runs past a guy swallowing a sword. Guess what? It's another Indian street trick. Not Arab. Abu the monkey grabs the sword from the sword swallower and starts swinging the sword at the guards. Casual violence. There is a quick funny moment where the guards look at each other and realize they all have their own swords. Is the violence cartoony and thus funny? Or is it okay because it's Arabs and Arabs are just so violent? I always laugh at this part. Abu just looks at the starving kids and basically says, "Screw those kids. I got my bread, let them starve." And just keeps chomping. But then those starving kids run out into the street. They accidentally block a rich prince on a horse. And what's the prince's first reaction? He calls them filthy brats, pulls out a whip, and tries to hit them. Ah, casual violence towards orphan children in broad daylight on the streets of Arabia. It's just another day. The movie is loudly telling the audience that Arabs are quick to anger. It tells us they'll gladly attack anyone without a second thought, even poor, defenseless children. Okay, what even is this? Is that a turban mullet? I've never seen a turban where the back part starts at the top of the head. It's always at the bottom. It just looks wrong, but funny. But let me take a minute to say something nice. While the palace architecture is off, the streets of Agrabah looks pretty real. They look a lot like Moroccan architecture. You can walk through streets and alleyways in real life Morocco that do look like this. So Disney gets one good point here. Then we're introduced to the Sultan. And once again, his design looks cartoonishly Indian to me. Nothing about this is saying Arab. We're introduced to Princess Jasmine, and we really need to talk about her. She's easily the most overtly sexualized princess Disney has ever created. Look at her outfit. Her shoulders are bare. She's showing off her stomach. She has visible cleavage. This would never, ever be what a princess wears in Arabia. Princesses and queens in Arabia of yesteryear and today dress conservatively. So why did Disney design her like this? Because it's a classic Orientalist trope. They made her look quote unquote exotic. They made her an object of desire for a Western audience. I promise I'm not being over the top about this. Let's look at Jasmine compared to all the other classic Disney princesses. Jasmine shows the most skin by far. And what makes it even more shocking is when you think about how modest and conservative real Arab society is. This feels like a giant slap in the face, like Disney is mocking us by making the character from the most modest society in the world the most scantily clad compared to all the other Disney princesses. Princess Jasmine has a pet tiger named Raja. Are tigers from Arabia? No, they're Indian. And the name Raja is also Indian. You get the pattern by now. Jasmine tells her father,
I hate being forced into this. If I do marry, I want it to be for love.
This is a very modern Western idea dropped right into an ancient Arab setting. Throughout history, including European history, royal families married to build power and protect land. They didn't marry for love. But honestly, I am torn on how to view this. On one hand, it might just be Disney showing us she's an independent person, which is a good thing. On the other hand, it might be Disney trying to send in a hidden message. It could be them saying, look at how backwards these barbarians are. The Western way of true love is better. But I want to be fair here. Forced royal marriages happened all over the world, even in Western cultures. So I won't look too deeply into this plot point. Plus, I have to give the Sultan credit. He actually frames the marriage as wanting to make sure Jasmine is safe and taken care of when he's gone. Jasmine says she's never been outside the palace walls. You could argue this is a Western stereotype about how Arab men trap women inside, but I think that's a weak argument. It's just part of the story. The Sultan gets angry and literally says,
Allah forbid you should have any daughters.
Again casually name-dropping the supreme deity of Islam in an American cartoon. But just like before, I want to be fair. It fits perfectly with common Arab sayings. Jafar uses his snake staff to hypnotize people. Guess what? Snake charming is an Indian stereotype, not Arab. Jasmine wants to escape the palace. Her pet tiger, Raja, tries to stop her. But she tells him she can't stay. She can't let other people live her life for her. This is an example of classic Disney princess tropes. Ariel does it in The Little Mermaid. Belle does it in Beauty and the Beast. They feel trapped and they want to break free. Because of that, I can't say Disney is trying to push a specific stereotype about Arab women being controlled here, but you can definitely faintly smell it in the air. Jasmine is walking through the streets. Almost right away, she's hounded by loud merchants. It's a real stereotype. People yelling out cheap prices, begging you to come into the store to sample things. It happens. But I have to ask, is that specifically an Arab stereotype, or does that just happen at busy street markets all over the world? You tell me in the comments. Then Aladdin sees Jasmine for the very first time. Boom. Instantly falls in love. Although this is a classic Western story trope, falling in love at first sight, this does happen in the original Aladdin story from Arabian Nights as well. Jasmine sees a poor, starving kid. She feels bad, so she grabs a piece of fruit and gives it to him. She's naive. She's been living in a rich palace her whole life, so she honestly doesn't know you have to pay for things. And this is where we get one of the most outrageous examples of Orientalism in this whole movie. The merchant sees her take the fruit. Does he yell at her? Does he ask her for money? No. He pulls out a giant sword, grabs her arm, forces her hand down onto a wooden block, and raises the blade to chop her hand straight off. This is so disgusting. It's pushing that same negative stereotype we keep talking about. It tells the audience that Arabs get angry instantly and that our first instinct is always brutal violence. I want you to fully understand this. So I have to explain to you why there's this whole stereotype of when you steal something, you get your hand cut off in Arabia. It originates from the Quran, the holy book of Islam. Surah 5, verse 38. As for male and female thieves, cut off their hands for what they have done, a deterrent from Allah. And Allah is Almighty, All-Wise. But I have 3 very important things to say about this. First, the very next verse in the Quran is critical to the context. But whoever repents after their wrongdoing and mends their ways, Allah will surely turn to them in forgiveness. Indeed, Allah is all forgiving, most merciful. Second, the real world process is not street justice. You do not just see someone steal an apple and bam, pull out a sword and chop their hand off in an alleyway. People still have to go through a legal court system. You have to prove that the person stole the item. If it's proven, then yeah. The punishment can be losing a hand, and there are Islam-dominant countries like Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Afghanistan that still practice this today. 3. Absolutely none of this lets Disney off the hook. Showing a random street merchant acting like a violent vigilante, ready to chop off a teenager's hand in public without a trial, that is not how the real world works. It's a sick Orientalist fantasy, and Disney pushed this specific violent viewpoint right in the middle of a kid's cartoon. I just think it's shocking and sick. Aladdin is staring up at the palace. Jasmine is upset, and she says something really interesting here.
Sure, people who tell you where to go and how to dress.
Wait a minute, Jasmine. Is someone telling you how to dress while you're walking around in that outfit? I honestly don't know how to feel about this one. On one hand, she's just saying that she feels controlled in the palace. But on the other hand, you can easily read this as a Western comment on how Arab culture forces women to cover up. But that doesn't make any sense for Jasmine because she clearly dresses however she wants. She tells Aladdin her father's forcing her to marry. Aladdin replies, "That's awful." But historically, that reaction makes no sense. Arranged marriages were societally normal back then, especially in the ruling class. This comes off as Western ideology creeping into the script. Aladdin gets captured. Jasmine goes to Jafar to complain. And as she walks up to him, you can clearly see the tight outline of her backside. You may think I'm reaching with this point, but I decided to go through the entire movie again just to look at Aladdin's ass. Every time he is standing still or walking and we see his backside, the animators or drawers do not show the outline of his booty. Look at this scene. Aladdin is literally bent over where it would be acceptable to show the outline of his butt because his butt would be sticking out. But they don't draw it. Every time Jasmine is shown from the backside, just simply walking, the outline of her butt is drawn. Every woman character this happens to in this cartoon. It happens with the women characters, it happens with Jasmine, but it doesn't happen with the male characters. It's just so funny to me. Disney throws in these Western ideas about freedom. They want to show that Arab society traps women, but at the exact same time, they over-sexualize Jasmine in a Western sexist way. They push this Orientalist view that Arab men oppress women, while Disney is the one actually objectifying her. Her pants are supposed to be baggy and airy, but somehow they're skin tight at the top. It's a massive misogynistic double standard. Jafar fakes feeling bad for her and puts his hands on her shoulders to comfort her. As an Arab, this is so weird to watch. Rubbing someone's shoulders to comfort them is a very Western thing. In the Arab world, both in the ancient past and today, a man would never put his hands on a woman unless she was his wife or family member. Aladdin gets sent to the magic cave. We meet Magic Carpet. Reminder, magic carpets are not in the original Aladdin story. It comes from another Arabian Nights tale called Prince Ahmed and the Fairy Parabano. But Disney actually borrowed the magic carpet likely from the 1940 Thief of Baghdad movie. Aladdin escapes the cave. The fake Jafar tricks Aladdin for the lamp. Aladdin gives it to him, and what is his reward? A dagger straight to the heart. Another casual example of murder being as common as drinking water in Arabia. Thanks, Orientalism. Aladdin rubs the lamp, and out pops the genie. And wow, it's a total joy to watch Robin Williams do his thing. I give the genie character my full approval. He completely embraces the wild, wacky energy of a cartoon. He's fun, entertaining, and honestly, I can't think of a single bad thing to say about him. The lamp and genie are in the original Aladdin story, but the rule about only getting 3 wishes, that's not canon. Disney took that rule from a different Arabian Nights story called The Fisherman and the Genie. Let's talk a little bit about real genies in Arab culture. We call them jinn for males or jinniya for females. They are all over Arab folklore and are a common plot device in the Arabian Nights book. People still talk about them today in modern Arabia. It's a big part of Arab superstition culture. Just the other day, I was telling my aunt about looking up at the sky and seeing something whiz by the night sky, and she immediately says, it could have been a jinn. But the jinn of the Arabian Nights aren't as wild or entertaining as Robin Williams. The genies are more mysterious. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're evil. There's a whole spectrum of jinn. Let's look closely at this one part in Genie's song. He breathes fire, and 3 belly dancing looking women pop up while he sings, "Can your friends go, whoo, well looky here." They're wearing almost nothing. They dance all around Aladdin and one of them bumps her backside right into him. I guess that's a common thing for a woman to do to Aladdin. This is textbook Orientalist fetishizing, the over-sexualization of exotic women. In this scene, these aren't people. They're objects of desire. Genie literally says, "Looky here," as if it's a spectacle. They exist as props, purely for a magical genie to summon, so he can please his master, a man. The women pop up again. She bends over to kiss Aladdin, but the genie plays a trick and takes her place. Look, the Arab part of me is really weirded out by this. Disney animated a half-naked woman for 2 seconds just to push the idea that women only exist for Arab men's sexual pleasure. But the other part of me knows this is just a classic goofy cartoon trick. But did you catch the specific lyric the genie sings right there? He calls Aladdin a big nabob. What's a nabob? Nabob is an old historical term. It was used for a Western person who went to India, made a huge fortune, and came back to Europe. Orientalism is sitting right out in the open. They're literally using words with deep colonial ties. Then we get to a part that I love. The genie doesn't summon sexy women next. He summons sexy camels. That part's just silly and always makes me laugh. And shout out to Kuwait for having the best national animal, the camel. I love camels. The genie moves the whole gang to an oasis. Because of course there's an oasis. It's a common movie trope. If a character is walking through a desert, they're always going to find a magical oasis. It's not really a negative stereotype, but I just wanted to point it out. Can you guess what animal the genie is going to turn Abu into? A giant elephant, of course. Because nothing says Arabia quite like an elephant, right? Prince Ali is making his grand entrance. Look at the parade. The men are fully dressed and their heads are completely covered. But the women, they barely wear any clothes. They're not even wearing shoes. It's pure Orientalism. But I will commend Disney on one detail here. The men in the parade are dancing with swords. This is a traditional Arab custom, and people still practice it today. They get a little credit here. Look at the women fanning Prince Ali or Prince Ali. This is a double whammy of Orientalism and sexism. The idea that women are just sexual objects is baked so deeply into this movie. Even when the genie transforms into a woman for a quick joke, they draw him wearing almost nothing. They give him breasts just to sexualize him even more. But thank goodness they made sure to draw a see-through veil over his face, even with his chest in plain view. And now we get the floating man trick. I was wondering when that was going to pop up. Classic Indian street magic tricks, not Arab. Silly side note here. I always thought the lyrics were Prince Ali, Ali Ali, Ali al-Babwa. Like they were just repeating his name over and over again. But I just looked up the lyrics and yeah, I got that wrong. Jasmine overhears the three men fighting over who gets to marry her. She's not even in the room.
Standing around deciding my future? I am not a prize to be won.
I agree with Jasmine. I love that she says this, but we need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. We have a Western cartoon telling millions of kids that in Arabia, men decide who women marry without their permission, without them even being present. The movie presents this as an absolute fact. This idea that Arab women are constantly forced into marriage without their consent is a Western concoction. Does it happen in real life? Unfortunately, yes, but religiously and legally, it's forbidden everywhere. We get to the famous balcony scene. Aladdin tells Jasmine,
"You aren't just some prize to be won. You should be free to make your own choice."
What makes this Orientalist is Jasmine's reaction. She looks utterly shocked. A man is saying this? A prince, no less? The movie makes it seem like the very idea of an Arab man supporting a woman's freedom defies heaven and earth. Because remember the stereotype. Arab men are hounds who own women like property. Then we get to the famous A Whole New World scene. I've got nothing bad to say about it. It's beautiful. The song is wonderful. It gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. Okay, I lied. I have one problem with the visuals in this scene. The two swoop down from the clouds and suddenly we're looking at the pyramids and the Sphinx. Is this really what Westerners think when they hear Arabia? Pyramids? Agrabah is supposed to be a fictional city, but now we're suddenly visiting real-world landmarks. I actually have a funny story regarding pyramids. A few years ago, I was working on the creative team at Geico in Washington, D.C. I was meeting my new coworkers, and I told one of the graphic designers that I was from Kuwait. He instantly smiled and said, "Oh, yeah, that's where the pyramids are." I laughed out loud so hard, and he was just confused. I had to explain to him that there are no pyramids in Kuwait. They're in Egypt, which is over 1,000 miles away from Kuwait. That would be like me looking at an American and saying, "Oh, you're from Florida. That's where the Empire State Building is." Aladdin brings Jasmine back to the palace balcony. And then we get the, well, kiss? This is an example of Western fantasy tropes shoving its way into an Arab story. The movie is telling the audience, this is how love happens. But this would never happen in ancient Arabia. It wouldn't even happen where I'm from today. In Kuwait, dating is still seen as taboo, and it's like that in many Arab countries. So dropping a casual romantic kiss into a story set in a fictionalized Baghdad feels strange. But we also need to talk about how problematic this kiss is, no matter where you're from. Magic Carpet quickly bumps Aladdin up to Jasmine's lips. It's a forced, non-consensual kiss. Jasmine looks surprised at first, but then she just smiles, closes her eyes, and is enjoying it. I just love when kids' cartoons show a non-consensual kiss, but it's totally fine because the woman ends up liking it, right, Disney? The music is trying to communicate that this is a romantic moment, but all it really does is push harmful ideas about consent and sexual assault. Why did anyone think that this was okay? The Sultan walks into Jasmine's room. He's under Jafar's spell, and he tells her he's finally chosen a husband for her. And of course, it's Jafar. Now, yes, the story tells us he's under a magical spell. That doesn't excuse the underlying message. It's still pushing the Orientalist view that Arab fathers force their daughters into marriage and the brides get zero say in it. Then the Sultan yells out,
Praise Allah!
This feels like the most Western thing I've ever heard in my life. The phrase itself is very normal in Arab culture, but it just feels dirty here. All I can picture is a British voice actor standing in a recording booth. The writers told him to say, praise Allah, simply because that's what they think a cartoon caricature of my people would say. The Sultan makes a joke. He tells Aladdin, I could kiss you, but I won't. I'll leave that to... And then he points at his daughter. Ick. Talking sexually about women, especially your own daughter, would never fly in Arabia. It's beyond taboo and another example of Disney shoving Western views into an Arab setting while totally ignoring our actual social rules. We get a wide shot of Aladdin sulking outside the palace. In the background, you see a flock of flamingos. Now you're probably thinking flamingos in the desert. That's actually real. Kuwait does have wild flamingos. Thousands of them fly to our coastal bays and mudflats from October to March when the weather cools down. My dad used to take us to see them on our way back from Entertainment City, RIP, since it was near one of the areas they like to flock to in Doha. I'll give Disney a point for that one. Jasmine runs out to Aladdin. She's so excited to announce their wedding, and she's got a new outfit on. This was the perfect chance for Disney to show they actually did their research. They could have drawn a beautiful, traditional Arab wedding dress. But nope, they just took her normal, revealing outfit and colored it white. Her shoulders and cleavage are still visible. I guess they made the sleeves longer, but that's it. And then right at the top of the stairs, she gives Aladdin a kiss. Kissing before marriage in Arabia does not happen. Jafar has taken over. He's ruling the palace, and Jasmine is in chains. She brings him a basket of fruit. Hilariously, she's dressed almost exactly like her normal outfit, but now it's colored red. I want to point out how dark this actually is. If this red outfit was just her slave outfit, that would make sense for the story. But think about it. Her slave outfit covers the same amount of skin as her royal princess outfit. That says a lot about how the animators viewed her from the very start. Jasmine tosses wine in Jafar's face. His first instinct is to raise his hand to hit her. He tells her he will teach her some respect. Now, I wanted to call this Orientalist violence. Jafar is just an evil, horrible person, so it does fit the character to go straight for violence. Still, the idea that a man has to hit a woman to make her respect him is a deeply problematic trope on its own. Then we get to the seduction scene. Jasmine tries to trick Jafar. She stands up and her veil falls down. She sways her cartoonishly tiny waist to show off her hips and tells Jafar how incredibly handsome he is. This is so problematic. It's pure Orientalism to overly sexualize a woman from a conservative culture. But to be fair, you could also argue she's just using her body as a weapon to distract him. But then the movie cuts to the genie. His jaw literally drops to the floor. It's that classic cartoonish reaction of a man being totally aroused by a woman. That kind of ruins the quote-unquote female empowerment argument right there. And by the way, Where did that blue veil even come from? She wasn't wearing it a minute ago. You see, it magically appears when she falls over a pot. She grabs it and then she lets it drop to the floor when she tries to seduce Jafar. This is so dubious. Think about it. The animators literally added a random piece of clothing into a scene just so she could drop it. They just wanted to use the sexy dress hitting the floor trope. Wow. So ridiculous. Jasmine kisses Jafar to distract him so Aladdin can steal the lamp. This is another Western trope and it hurts to watch. But I have to admit, I seriously love how Aladdin, Abu, and the parrot Iago react to it. I mean, come on, Jafar isn't that ugly. The whole giant snake fight sequence is animated beautifully. It's absolutely stunning work and a wonderful scene. But I really don't like what happens to Jasmine here. She goes from being a brave hero who helps fight the bad guy to being a classic Western damsel in distress. She gets trapped inside a giant hourglass. Aladdin has to save her. She is reduced to a helpless object who becomes a prize for Aladdin to win. And this feels wrong. For the entire movie, she was fighting for her freedom and equality. It's conflicting to watch Disney just turn her into a helpless victim by the end of the movie. Jafar is defeated. Aladdin confesses that he lied about being a prince. And Jasmine looks right at him and says she loves him. I mean, this is so Disney. Jasmine has known Aladdin for what, 3 days? And now she's madly in love with him? Yeah, okay. Aladdin uses his final wish to set the genie free. It's a beautiful and fun moment. After that, the Sultan just decides to change the law. He says the princess can marry anyone she thinks is worthy. The Sultan doesn't just change his mind about Aladdin. With the wave of a hand, he unilaterally abolishes an ancient Arab law built on the customs, history, and traditions of the people. And what does he replace it with? A distinctively Western ideal of individualism and romantic freedom. On the surface, Disney packages this as a heartwarming, progressive triumph. We're supposed to cheer because true love wins. But if you look at it through the Orientalist framework we've been using this entire video, it's actually the ultimate act of cultural imperialism. The movie ends up sending a very clear, undeniable message to its audience. Western ideology is the cure for Eastern backwardness. It reinforces a strict dichotomy. What the West believes is inherently moral, enlightened, and right. What the Arab world believes is inherently oppressive, archaic, and wrong. The happy ending isn't the street rat getting the princess. The real happy ending Disney is selling is that Western values successfully conquered and erased an Arab tradition. The characters are only allowed to be happy once they abandon their own culture and adopt a Western one. It perfectly validates the exact Orientalist superiority complex that empires used to justify ruling over us in the first place. So of course, Jasmine chooses Aladdin. They sing a song together, fireworks go off in the night sky, they kiss and fly off toward the moon on the magic carpet. It's the ultimate classic Western idealized Disney ending. Chapter 6. What is Aladdin? Aladdin is the ultimate pulp culture example of Orientalism. Agrabah is a slush pile of Indian architecture with Moroccan streets, Indian fashion, and Arab-like names. It haphazardly throws it all into a blender and hits puree. It strips away the identity of these unique cultures and creates a generic brown land to tell a Western/European story of love. For millions of Western kids, this cartoon movie was their only education about the quote-unquote Arab world. I really want you to sit with that. If you grew up in Pennsylvania and you never met an Arab person, Aladdin was your documentary. It taught you what those people were like, and what it teaches is concerning. Here's my point. Disney wasn't looking at Arab culture for inspiration. They were looking at British colonial cinema and Orientalist stereotypes about Arabs. They were borrowing from a fantasy that was already offensive for hundreds of years before they started drawing. Disney was recycling stereotypes that were created by empires to justify colonizing and owning us. And they put it all to cartoony drawings and catchy beats. The opening handshake with the audience is telling children that Arabs are people who will mutilate you if they don't like the way you look. That we are casual, recreational people butchers. Then there's the visual coding. Disney animators are among the best in the world. Glenn Keane, one of Aladdin's key animators, is a legend. In one of the only positive things they borrowed from Arab culture, he tried making the characters very flowy because it's similar to how flowy the Arabic language is. But look at what they did here. Aladdin and Jasmine have American accents. Aladdin doesn't have a beard. His facial structure was modeled after Tom Cruise. They're coded as Western. That tells the audience, these are the good ones. You can trust them because they look and sound like you. Now look at the bad guys. The palace guards, the merchant who tries to chop Jasmine's hand off, Jafar, darker skin, hooked noses, heavy beards, thick gravelly accents. They're coded as other. The late Dr. Jack Shaheen, who studied Orientalism his whole life, pointed out that in Hollywood, the Arab is almost always a villain. And not a cool villain, a repulsive one. In Aladdin, the movie's telling you that the more Arab you look and sound, the more evil you are. The more American you look and sound, the more heroic you are. It's skin color based discrimination wrapped in a magic carpet ride. Chapter 7, the sword factor. Okay, so the lyrics are mean and the drawings are stereotypical. You might say, so what? Every Disney movie has stereotypes. But there's something specific about the violence in Aladdin that I think people miss. I want you to think about the Disney Renaissance. The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast. What's the threat in those movies? In Little Mermaid, it's a sea witch with magic. In Beauty and the Beast, it's a curse. The violence is magical. It's fairy tale violence. Now look at Aladdin. The threat is amputation. Guards constantly swing swords at Aladdin's head. A grown man threatens to chop off a woman's hand because she stole an apple. Jafar doesn't want to cast a spell. He wants to become the supreme ruler and enslave the people of Agrabah. The violence in Aladdin is human aggression. It's lethal. It implies that the Arab world is a place where law and order don't exist, only brute force. When Jafar gets the lamp and turns into a genie, the entire color palette of the movie shifts. The sky turns red. The palace becomes dark and twisted. This reinforces a very old Orientalist trope, the idea of the Oriental despot. The idea is that Arabs cannot handle power. If you give an Arab man power, he won't build democracy. He'll become a tyrant. He will turn the world into a living hell. It links Arab culture to destructiveness. When the genie, who's coded as American and played by Robin Williams, has power, it's blue, it's fun, it's pulp culture references. When Jafar, the Arab, has power, it's red, it's snakes, it's death. It teaches kids that Arab magic is dangerous, while Western magic is whimsical. Chapter 8, the reconciliation. I've spent this whole video tearing this movie apart. I've told you it's racist, Orientalist. I've told you it's colonialist propaganda. I've told you it hates me and the Arab people and all the people who are not Western. And yet, I like it. I know every word to Friend Like Me. I get goosebumps during A Whole New World. Why? How do I love the thing that mocks me? Let me explain the 3 reasons why I still like Aladdin. Reason 1, the artistry. The movie is arguably the best directed film in the Disney canon. The movement, the fluidity, the comedy. Robin Williams didn't just voice a character. He changed the medium of animation forever. He improvised so much that the animators had to work backward from his voice. It's a chaotic, beautiful explosion of creativity. As an Arab kid, even if the representation was bad, it was dazzling. Seeing a desert that looked like art, seeing the palace, it was crumbs. But they were delicious crumbs. Reason 2, the fantasy defense. This is my personal coping mechanism. I've decided for my own mental health that Agrabah is not the Middle East. I treat Agrabah the same way I treat Westeros in Game of Thrones. Westeros borrows from medieval England, right? It has knights and castles, but also has dragons and ice zombies. This isn't really England or British people. It's a fantasy skin. Reason number 3, which is huge, is the original Aladdin story origin is complicated. Let's look at the actual history of the text. The very first time Aladdin appears in writing is in the 1709 French translation of Arabian Nights. The translator, a man named Antoine Galland, added famous stories like Aladdin and Ali Baba to the book. Galland claimed he got the Aladdin story from a Syrian storyteller named Hannah Diab. But here's the catch. No one has ever found that original Arabic manuscript. There is zero hard evidence that the Aladdin story even existed before Galland's French translation. On page 701 of the annotated Arabian Nights, it explains that scholars like Marina Warner think Aladdin just wrote Aladdin himself. He might have used key cultural elements from Arabia to make it feel like a real Arab story. Other scholars, like Ruth Bottenheimer, think Hana Diab really did write it, but Galan heavily edited it. He added Western storytelling elements to make the story easier for French readers to swallow. Why do they think that? Let's look at the original story. There's a scene where Aladdin lays down next to Princess Badr al-Badur. They're not married yet, so he places a sword in the bed between them to prove he means her no harm. That's not an Arab tradition at all. So where does it come from? In the Arthurian romances, Pellas played a sword in the bed between Gawain and Arcade. Tristan and Istol went to bed with a sword between them, and there was a sword placed between Sigurd and Brunhild. It's a classic European knight trope. The book goes on to point out even more European habits. The wedding ceremony of Aladdin looks very European, including his dancing with his new bride. And on top of that, there's also an unusual amount of dialogue and monologue in Aladdin, as well as unusual care in bringing out motivations. All these things indicate input from Galand or Diab. There's also a part in the story where Aladdin's mother calls the genie's magic the devil's trade. The mother's blanket denunciation of magic speaks more to attitudes in 18th century Europe than to the views of the medieval Arab storytellers who were responsible for the early development of the 1001 Nights. Some magical practices were forbidden, while many uses of deviation and talismans were documented. When you add all this up, the truth becomes clear. There are just too many Western fingerprints on this text. You can't honestly call the original Aladdin a pure Arab story. It's a hybrid, a mishmash of Arab, Indian, Persian, and Turkish tales, all mixed with European storytelling tropes. When you look at it that way, there's a perfect ironic parallel with the Disney movie. It's just a messy blend of Orientalist stereotypes, Arab, Turkish, Persian, and Indian visuals, all stitched together with modern American storytelling. The movie is repeating the history of the tale. But does that excuse any of the heavy-handedness Orientalism in Disney's Aladdin? No, of course not. Agrabah is Dungeons and Dragons with a desert texture pack. It borrows the aesthetics of my culture, the curved swords, the pointed arches, the names, but it strips them of all cultural weight. How much of this was intentional? How much of it was subliminal? Did Disney and the team that made Aladdin purposefully mix all these cultures to avoid criticism or being too close to what's real? They slip up a lot in this movie for sure. But maybe they were making an effort to avoid being too real. I'll never know. The movie's so ridiculous, so over the top, it almost circles back around to being harmless. It's so divorced from the reality of my life in Kuwait or the reality of my father's life that it feels like a cartoon. I mean, it is a kid's cartoon after all. When Jafar turns into a giant snake, I'm not thinking, man, this reflects poorly on Arab geopolitical relations. I'm thinking, that's a cool snake. I know it was a bunch of Western people creatively stealing from a 1940s movie to make a whimsical cartoon set in a fantasy version of Arabia. It's problematic, but also amazing at the same time. A bunch of Westerners were going off what they've been told of Arabia, and it makes total sense when you watch Aladdin. It just makes me sad that it uses harmful stereotypes that demonize an entire ethnicity of people. And what's even sadder today is knowing how much research, care, and intention Disney puts into making movies about other cultures, like Lilo and Stitch, Moana, and Encanto, where they make sure every actor is from the place they're depicting, where they work with local musicians to create songs that are authentic to the people, where they hire consultants and bring in cultural experts to make sure that what they're making resonates with the people and cultures they're depicting, rather than being offensive. So when the live-action remake of Aladdin was announced, I was so excited. Surely Disney would right all their Orientalist wrongs they made with the cartoon movie. They'd bring in Arab actors and consultants and... No. The conclusion. Don't confuse the map with the territory. So where does this all leave us? If you're watching this and you're not Arab and you love Aladdin, good. You should. It's a great movie. I'm not here to cancel your childhood or tell you you're a bad person for singing A Whole New World in the shower. But here's my ask. I need you to understand what you're watching. You aren't looking at Arab culture. You're looking at a Western fantasy of Orientalism. You're looking at a funhouse mirror. It's distorted. It's It's exaggerated, and it's designed to make you feel safe and superior. Enjoy the animation, laugh at the genie, but please, for the love of falafel, don't let this movie be a data point you have on the Arab people. Because we don't actually cut off your ear if we don't like your face. We usually offer you tea, then we offer you more tea, then we insist you stay for dinner. Laugh with us and be happy. That's the real Arabian Night. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching this video. Do you want me to dissect the live action Aladdin remake? Trust me, it's so much worse than the cartoon. Let me know in the comments if you want me to make a video on that movie and how they had no excuses for pushing their Orientalist agenda to make a profit.